The ground shuddered beneath Logan Voss' boots as another detonation rocked Kestris 4. The force sent a cascade of dust from the rafters, the metal walls groaning from the aftershock. He pressed his back against a steel support beam, his breath uneven. Outside, the colony was burning. "Control, come in!" he barked into his wrist communicator. Static, no response. The comms were dead. From his vantage point inside Processing Station B, Logan could see the main colony square, a space that just this morning had been filled with workers hauling isotope ore for transport. Now it was a field of bodies. The Tarless Dominion had arrived like an unspoken nightmare. No warnings, no negotiations. Their ships had descended through the thick cloud cover, sleek and insectile, their hulls glowing with eerie amber veins as they tore through Kestris 4's upper atmosphere. Within minutes, communications had gone dark, and the colony's security system, a modest defensive net, had been reduced to slag. The aliens moved with eerie efficiency, their towering exoskeletal frames gleaming as they stalked the panicked workers. Their weapons weren't designed to kill outright, not yet. The Tarless were slavers. Instead, their rifles emitted bursts of pulsating energy, wrapping victims in viscous, luminous cocoons before they were hauled onto transport carriers. The unlucky few who resisted were simply reduced to unrecognizable remains. Logan pulled himself deeper into the building, ducking behind an overturned storage crate. He could hear them now, their segmented limbs clicking against the hard surface of the landing platforms, the unnerving whisper of their synthetic vocalizers exchanging words in an unreadable cadence. A burst of static erupted in his earpiece. Then, a voice. "This is Chief Operator Rennick. Anyone receiving?" Logan pressed the communicator to his lips. "Rennick, it's Voss. I'm in Processing B. Where the hell is everyone?" "We're being taken," came the grim response. "Comms are fried, power's down, and they've already loaded half the settlement into their ships. Logan, they're jamming any outgoing signals. We need to—" The line cut out. Logan clenched his teeth, his mind racing. They needed to warn Earth. But with the Tarless scrambling every transmission, a standard distress beacon wouldn't work. Then it hit him. The old seismic relays. The colony had been built over unstable tectonic plates, with a redundant emergency network designed to detect quakes and broadcast low-frequency warning signals through subspace. The system had been decommissioned years ago, written off as outdated. But if he could reach the console, no time for hesitation. Logan sprinted toward the maintenance tunnel access panel. The moment he reached for it, a shadow loomed behind him. A jagged limb swung in a blinding arc. Logan barely twisted in time. A razor-sharp appendage grazed his side, slicing clean through the fabric of his uniform. The force of the impact sent him sprawling onto the grated floor, his ribs screaming in protest. He looked up. A Tarless enforcer stood over him. The creature's dark, segmented plates pulsed faintly, like an organic machine breathing through its shell. Its multifaceted eyes reflected Logan's stunned expression in fragmented shards. It tilted its head, as if studying him, before raising a barbed capture lance. Logan rolled to the side just as the weapon struck down, the tip embedding itself into the floor where he had been moments before. Without thinking, he grabbed a nearby metal rod and jammed it into the creature's exposed throat plating. The alien reeled back, making a strangled clicking noise, dark fluid spraying from the wound. Logan wasted no time. He pushed himself to his feet and lunged for the control panel, slamming his fist against the override switch. A low-frequency tremor vibrated through the colony's buried infrastructure. The distress signal was out. A force slammed into his back. Then, darkness. The control room aboard Earth's Orbital War Command was a symphony of controlled chaos. Dozens of officers hovered over data displays, analyzing intercepted transmissions, tracking deep space movements. "Sir," a lieutenant called, adjusting his headset. We just picked up something. It's an old seismic relay signal, but it's coming from Kestris, 4 inches. Admiral Marcus Steele turned from the central display, his eyes narrowing. Kestris? That's a resource colony, not a military asset. What's the message? The officer hesitated, enhancing the transmission. A fragmented voice crackled through the speakers. We are under attack. They are taking us. No negotiation. No demands. They just took us. Then, nothing. Silence fell over the control room. Steele exhaled slowly. Do we have a fleet in range? Negative, sir, another officer responded. Standard fleet trajectory would take 5 months to reach Kestris 4 at full burn. Steele's gaze hardened. Then we don't follow standard trajectory. The strategic chamber was divided. 12 of Earth's highest-ranking military leaders sat in heavy silence, analyzing the data sprawled across the centralized laser plasma display. A colony like Kestris 4 isn't defensible, one general stated. It was never meant to withstand an invasion. Even if we respond, they'll be long gone before we arrive. We can't chase ghosts, another added. Steele leaned forward, his knuckles pressing into the table. If we let this happen without response, we set a precedent. Today it's Kestris. Tomorrow it's every colony beyond the core worlds. Then what's the alternative? Steele's expression was unwavering. We deploy the 67th Rapid Response Fleet, and we use high-velocity FTL projection. A murmur of unease rippled through the room. That tech is untested, one admiral warned. It could tear the fleet apart mid-jump. Steele's response was unrelenting. Or it could let us cross 5 months' distance in 6 days. He let the weight of the statement settle before delivering the final blow. Make no mistake, this isn't about one colony. It's about whether humanity answers its own when called. The room fell into tense silence. Then, one by one, nods of assent. The operation was green-lit. Across 3 classified shipyards, Earth's most elite warships were being prepped for immediate deployment. The 67th Fleet, composed of heavy assault destroyers, carrier-class battleships, and atmospheric insertion craft, was loaded with the finest military assets humanity had to offer. Steele himself stood aboard the flagship Invictus. His second-in-command, Commander Doran Hale, stepped forward. Orders, sir? Steele's gaze hardened as he turned toward the vast black horizon of space. Lock coordinates. Secure the fleet. He paused, his voice colder than the void itself. We're going to show them why Earth doesn't negotiate. The restraints bit into Logan Voss's wrists. His body slumped against the cold containment cell floor. His last memory before blacking out was the weight of the enforcer pinning him down, the dull snap of a containment harness locking around his chest. Now, flickering amber light from an overhead luminar flickered across the smooth walls, pulsing in an eerie rhythm that made his skull throb. A low murmur filled the air, Tarless speech, clipped and guttural, filtering through the reinforced barrier. Logan forced his eyes open. Across the detention block, workers from Kestris 4 were corralled into holding pens, their faces hollow, their postures slumped with exhaustion. Some clutched wounds that had gone untreated. Others sat in silence, avoiding eye contact with the towering figures patrolling the perimeter. The scent of scorched insulation lingered, remnants of whatever destruction had raised the colony's outer defenses. He rolled his shoulders, testing the stiffness in his limbs. His fingers twitched. Good, nothing broken. They hadn't killed him yet. That meant something. A shadow fell across the reinforced glass. Logan tensed. The Tarless officer observing him stood just beyond the barrier, its elongated skull framed by the shifting glow of control panels lining the opposite wall. The being's segmented armor flexed as it shifted, its multi-limbed form exuding a presence both unnatural and methodical. It raised a limb, tapping a thin metallic probe against the security panel, causing the glass to ripple slightly before its voice cut through the air. "You understand your situation, human." Logan lifted his chin, meeting the creature's gaze without flinching. "You'll have to be more specific. The part where you stormed in uninvited, or the part where you're too slow to finish the job?" A clicking vibration ran through the tarless chest cavity, something between a growl and amusement. "You believe your people will come for you." Logan allowed himself a smirk. "I don't believe. I know." The officer tilted its head, unreadable. "Your colony falls under no military jurisdiction. Your distress signal, should it have even escaped, was irrelevant. Earth's fleets will deliberate for cycles before responding. By then, you and the rest of your kind will have already served your purpose elsewhere." Logan let the words roll past him, unshaken. He wasn't listening to what the creature said. He was watching how it moved. Every subtle gesture, every flick of its clawed fingers over the control panel. The Tarless were creatures of habit, relying on strict procedural efficiency. That was their weakness. They assumed superiority meant predictability. From his position, Logan had spent the last hour memorizing guard rotations, security overrides, the layout of their monitoring systems. They'd taken his tools, but that didn't matter. He didn't need them to break things. The officer lingered for another moment before retreating, its armored form vanishing into the corridor beyond. The heavy containment doors hissed shut, sealing Logan in once more. They think we're cattle. That's their mistake. Across the colony, the Tarless worked with measured detachment. Their forces patrolled key infrastructure, securing anti-aircraft sentries, adjusting long-range sensory networks, and finalizing transport procedures. Overhead, orbital sentinels loomed like silent sentries, their sleek hulls drifting in calculated formations. Within the war room, Commander Vorek Zathos stood at the center of a projected terrain layout, watching as real-time surveillance feeds flickered across the display. His subordinates flanked either side, monitoring the status of their captured workforce. "Transit preparations?" he asked, his secondary set of mandibles twitching. 80% complete, Commander," one of the officers replied. "First wave of vessels will depart within the cycle. Remaining assets will be secured shortly thereafter." Zathos exhaled through his spiracles, pacing the chamber with measured steps. He was not concerned. Human settlements were soft targets. No defenses, no strategic countermeasures, just an inevitable harvest waiting to be collected. Even if Earth noticed, they were incapable of rapid deployment across such distances. By the time they formulated a response, the colony would be stripped, repurposed, and discarded. The restraints bit into Logan Voss's wrists. His body slumped against the cold containment cell floor. His last memory before blacking out was the weight of the enforcer pinning him down, the dull snap of a containment harness locking around his chest. Now, flickering amber light from an overhead luminar flickered across the smooth walls, pulsing in an eerie rhythm that made his skull throb. A low murmur filled the air, Tarless speech, clipped and guttural, filtering through the reinforced barrier. Logan forced his eyes open. Across the detention block, workers from Kestris 4 were corralled into holding pens, their faces hollow, their postures slumped with exhaustion. Some clutched wounds that had gone untreated. Others sat in silence, avoiding eye contact with the towering figures patrolling the perimeter. The scent of scorched insulation lingered, remnants of whatever destruction had raised the colony's outer defenses. He rolled his shoulders, testing the stiffness in his limbs. His fingers twitched. Good, nothing broken. They hadn't killed him yet. That meant something. A shadow fell across the reinforced glass. Logan tensed. The Tarless officer observing him stood just beyond the barrier, its elongated skull framed by the shifting glow of control panels lining the opposite wall. The being's segmented armor flexed as it shifted, its multi-limbed form exuding a presence both unnatural and methodical. It raised a limb, tapping a thin metallic probe against the security panel, causing the glass to ripple slightly before its voice cut through the air. "You understand your situation, human." Logan lifted his chin, meeting the creature's gaze without flinching. "You'll have to be more specific. The part where you stormed in uninvited, or the part where you're too slow to finish the job?" A clicking vibration ran through the tarless chest cavity, something between a growl and amusement. "You believe your people will come for you." Logan allowed himself a smirk. "I don't believe. I know." The officer tilted its head, unreadable. "Your colony falls under no military jurisdiction. Your distress signal, should it have even escaped, was irrelevant. Earth's fleets will deliberate for cycles before responding. By then, you and the rest of your kind will have already served your purpose elsewhere." Logan let the words roll past him, unshaken. He wasn't listening to what the creature said. He was watching how it moved. Every subtle gesture, every flick of its clawed fingers over the control panel. The Tarless were creatures of habit, relying on strict procedural efficiency. That was their weakness. They assumed superiority meant predictability. From his position, Logan had spent the last hour memorizing guard rotations, security overrides, the layout of their monitoring systems. They'd taken his tools, but that didn't matter. He didn't need them to break things. The officer lingered for another moment before retreating, its armored form vanishing into the corridor beyond. The heavy containment doors hissed shut, sealing Logan in once more. They think we're cattle. That's their mistake. Across the colony, the Tarless worked with measured detachment. Their forces patrolled key infrastructure, securing anti-aircraft sentries, adjusting long-range sensory networks, and finalizing transport procedures. Overhead, orbital sentinels loomed like silent sentries, their sleek hulls drifting in calculated formations. Within the war room, Commander Vorek Zathos stood at the center of a projected terrain layout, watching as real-time surveillance feeds flickered across the display. His subordinates flanked either side, monitoring the status of their captured workforce. "Transit preparations?" he asked, his secondary set of mandibles twitching. 80% complete, Commander," one of the officers replied. "First wave of vessels will depart within the cycle. Remaining assets will be secured shortly thereafter." Zathos exhaled through his spiracles, pacing the chamber with measured steps. He was not concerned. Human settlements were soft targets. No defenses, no strategic countermeasures, just an inevitable harvest waiting to be collected. Even if Earth noticed, they were incapable of rapid deployment across such distances. By the time they formulated a response, the colony would be stripped, repurposed, and discarded. A low-pitched chime interrupted his thoughts. One of the technicians frowned, adjusting the input relay on his station. "Unusual activity detected in Sector 4. Zathos turned sharply. "Specify." The technician's mandibles twitched as he processed the data. "Minor power surge, localized within a decommissioned relay grid. No direct structural failure, but anomalous." Zathos studied the readout with narrowed pupils. It was nothing. A localized fluctuation in an outdated system. He let out a dismissive chuff. "Not relevant. Focus all resources on final departure protocols." The officer hesitated. "If it is human interference, then let them interfere." Zathos's mandibles clicked in cold amusement. What could they possibly achieve? In the darkness of the detention wing, Logan Voss allowed himself a slow exhale. The small pulse of static in his ear told him his override had worked. A power fluctuation, barely significant enough to register, but just enough to create a window in the surveillance network. A blind spot. He ran a finger along the thin wire conduit he had palmed earlier, a makeshift tool he had lifted from one of the repair droids during an earlier transport shuffle. It wasn't much, but it was enough. With careful precision, he reached toward the secondary panel along his restraints, feeling for the minuscule gap between the plating. A well-placed current spike, deliberate, controlled, would trigger a low-level reboot cycle. He jammed the wire home. A sharp jolt surged through his arms. For an instant, his vision blurred. But then, the restraint cuffs released with a faint mechanical clunk. Not much time. Logan pulled himself upright, rubbing circulation back into his wrists. His next move had to be calculated. He wasn't breaking out alone. Not yet. That wasn't the goal. Instead, he moved toward the auxiliary panel along the far wall. The seismic network relay was still active, a forgotten relic beneath the colony's foundations. If he could piggyback a signal onto its frequency, it would register as nothing more than background noise to the Tarlis. But to Earth's long-range monitoring satellites, he worked quickly, fingers adjusting the manual sequence override. The system flickered, lines of code streaming across the display. The Tarlis had no idea how to account for the things they deemed obsolete. That was the difference between them and humans. They only valued what they could control. Humans, on the other hand, thrived in the gaps between expectation. Logan keyed in the final sequence. A faint pulse of energy surged through the deep subsurface grids, undetectable, untraceable, but very much sent. Earth had its coordinates. He allowed himself a smirk, pressing his back to the shadows once more. Let them think they had already won. That was the best part of a losing game. It made the ending all the more satisfying. The Tarlis Dominion had ruled through intimidation for centuries, carving a reputation across the frontier as an empire that never needed to look over its shoulder. But in the skies above Kestris IV, they were about to learn that they had chosen the wrong species to enslave. Without warning, the void tore open, and the 67th Fleet emerged like a silent judgment. The sensor-masking technology held, leaving the Tarlis unaware of the war machine looming just beyond their scanning range. Within the belly of the fleet, weapon systems synchronized, firing solutions locked onto enemy strongholds, planetary defenses, and transport lanes. Admiral Marcus Steele stood on the command deck of the Invictus, his eyes fixed on the laser plasma display before him. Tactical overlays showed the entire battlefield, from orbital sentries to ground-based installations, each marked with a kill priority level. Commander Doran Hale's voice cut through the operations channel. Orders confirmed. We hit them first, and we hit them hard. Steele nodded, his expression unreadable. Drop the hammer. Kinetic rods, each the size of a dropship, were released from high-altitude strike platforms, their descent guided by gravity and calculated momentum. They hit with the force of small meteors. The first impact shattered a key anti-air battery, the explosion sending shock waves rippling across the main Tarlis command outpost. Another strike collapsed a supply depot, burying their primary fuel reserves beneath twisted wreckage and debris. Down below, the Tarlis reacted too late. Alarm sirens screeched through their command centers, operators scrambling to pinpoint an enemy they had not yet seen. And then, the drones arrived. Hunter-killer units, autonomous and lethal, streaked through the upper atmosphere, deploying in tight formations. Their directives were simple: eliminate communications, cripple command structures, and reduce enemy maneuverability to zero. The Tarlis war network buckled within minutes. Orbital encryption hubs were cut off, jamming towers went offline in bursts of blue light, and long-range distress signals never reached their intended recipients. The Dominion was severed from reinforcements before they even knew they needed them. Inside his command post, Commander Vorek Zathos's mandibles twitched with unease. He had underestimated human reaction speed, expecting at least several weeks before a response fleet could be mustered. His grip tightened on the control panel as another shockwave from a kinetic impact rattled the facility. An officer stumbled toward him, breathless. "Commander, our orbital defenses are failing. We've lost long-range comms, and our planetary sentries are—" A resonating crash interrupted him, as an entire wall buckled inward. sending a cascade of rubble into the chamber. Zathos took a slow breath, mandibles flexing. He refused to believe they were outmaneuvered. Not yet. "Deploy ground forces," he said coldly. "Lock down the remaining sectors. They came too fast. They must be thinly spread." He turned toward the planetary surface display. "If they want to claim this world, let them bleed for it." From the deployment bays of the Invictus, hundreds of drop pods ignited their thrusters, their descent controlled by real-time adjustments from Fleet Command. Inside his pod, Commander Doran Hale secured his weapon to his chest, his breathing steady as the gravity of descent pulled at his body. Around him, elite troopers braced for impact, their HUD displays cycling through target acquisition markers. Hale's comms crackled. 10 seconds to drop. He exhaled through his nose, his fingers flexing inside his gloves. 5 seconds. Then the atmosphere caught them. The pods screamed through the sky, burning like falling stars as they streaked toward their landing zones. Anti-air defenses, what remained of them, fired blindly, their operators too overwhelmed to establish a coordinated counterstrike. Hale's pod hit first. The hatch detonated outward, and he surged into battle, rifle snapping toward the nearest Tarlis enforcer. His shots found their mark, sending the enemy sprawling before it could react. Behind him, his team emerged in synchronized precision, securing the landing zone in under 90 seconds. Every deployment zone across the planet followed the same brutal efficiency. Tarlis strongholds fell in waves, resistance pockets crumbling before Earth's superior tactics. The Dominion troops, conditioned to believe in their own supremacy, had never faced an enemy that fought with such methodical brutality. Yet not all of them panicked. Deep in the colony's occupied sector, Logan Voss felt the shift, the sudden tremors, the explosions rolling across enemy territory. He knew this wasn't another phase of the Tarlis occupation. This was liberation. A guard stormed into the detention wing, its posture tense. The Tarlis warrior barked orders to the others, readying them for relocation. Logan didn't wait. He launched forward, using the weight of his shackles as a weapon, swinging them against the nearest captor's throat. The alien staggered, its mandibles clicking in pain, and Logan ripped its weapon from its grasp. The remaining guards turned, too slow. He fired point blank, dropping the second before it could react. The third reached for an alarm beacon. Logan sent a kick into its joint plating, watching it collapse before finishing it off with a single shot to the cranial node. Then the alarm started blaring. He grabbed a comm device from the Fallen and tuned into open frequencies. A familiar voice cracked through. "This is Commander Hale of the 67th Fleet. Ground forces are moving through all sectors. Hostile forces are in full retreat. Any remaining human survivors, respond." Logan snatched the comm unit. "Doran, tell me you brought me a rifle." There was a pause, then a short laugh. "Voss, you're alive?" Logan wiped blood from his chin. "Little worse for wear, but I've got a real problem over here. They're loading captives onto transports. We need to cut them off before they jump." Hale's response was instant. "Give me coordinates." But Zathos was already adapting. The Tarlis war leader had lost his static defenses, but he still had a full division of shock troopers and multiple orbital transports at his command. He moved quickly, issuing direct orders as the skies above rained fire. "All remaining units, withdraw to Staging Ground 6. Hold perimeter until transports are secured." He refused to retreat. If he could recover even half of the captives and retreat into the outer system, he could rebuild his forces before Earth solidified control. But he failed to realize one thing. Earth wasn't playing for victory. They were playing for erasure. And the final stage was already in motion.
The planetary grid flickered. Tarlis command stations flared with emergency transmissions, data streams cascading across laser plasma displays, parsing out losses, fallback points, and the scrambling of reinforcements. Every critical Tarlus stronghold across Kestris 4 had been either neutralized or surrounded. Earth's ground forces pushed inward with relentless precision, sector by sector. Victory loomed. Then the sensor relays in low orbit detected something new. Admiral Steele's gaze sharpened as fresh signals appeared on the fleet's long-range scanners. A formation of Tarlus warships, hidden behind a nearby moon's gravitational shadow, had begun their approach. These were not the occupation vessels. These were the Dominion's heavy war fleet. He glanced toward Vice Admiral Seth Calder, who had already begun relaying battlefield adjustments. "They think they're about to flank us," Calder muttered. Steele's fingers traced the tactical interface, reading the enemy trajectory, vector speeds, and formation discipline. Their movement was aggressive but controlled. Too controlled. "They've been listening," Steele mused. "They think we committed everything to the surface." Calder turned, waiting for the next order. Steele gave it without hesitation. "Split the fleet. Bring our heavy interceptors forward, but stagger their formation. We'll leave the center open just enough to invite them in." Calder's lips twitched. "Then what?" "Then we shut the door." The 67th Fleet adjusted course, recalibrating its spread like a tightening noose. The Tarlus warships, seeing what appeared to be a defensive gap, surged forward. Inside his command vessel, Commander Exathos observed the shift on his own heads-up display. A calculated maneuver, but not enough to salvage this mission. Kestris 4 was lost, but if he could destroy Earth's fleet here, the Dominion's retaliation would be unstoppable. "Advance all units," he ordered. "Target their flagship, cut off their command structure." His warships accelerated, moving into the center of the so-called defensive hole. Then the trap snapped shut. From both flanks, Earth's heavy cruisers shifted, not retreating but repositioning. The space between them collapsed like a vice, sealing off the Tarlus fleet's mobility. Earth's battleships unloaded a coordinated assault, long-range mass drivers and energy barrages ripping into enemy shields before they could react. Exathos watched in mute disbelief, as half his fleet was obliterated before a single countermeasure could be issued. The shock wave of orbital destruction had barely reached Kestris 4's surface before the ground war shifted. Across the ruined cityscape, Tarlus ground reinforcements stormed into the war zones. Their forces deployed automated bipedal siege walkers, reinforced with kinetic-resistant armor plating, mounting dual-barreled plasma cannons capable of melting through standard infantry defenses in seconds. Earth's Marines adapted immediately. Pulse disruptor rounds laced with destabilizing ion charges crackled through the air. These weren't standard rounds. They were designed to exploit the molecular weak points in enemy shielding. Commander Doran Hale emerged from cover, leveling his modified assault rifle at the nearest walker. He fired 3 successive bursts, one shot tagging the upper joint assembly, the second hitting the sensor node, and the third ripping through its power couplings. The machine buckled, then it detonated outward in a violent arc of imploding metal. The rest of the mechanized division suffered the same fate. Each blast targeted for maximum efficiency. The Tarlus had planned for a war of attrition. Earth had planned for elimination. In the underground Tarlus stronghold, Logan Voss wiped blood from his temple, breathing hard as he pressed his back against a shattered control console. Around him, Earth's infiltration team worked swiftly, dispatching the last remaining officers guarding the planetary command center. Hale's voice cut through the comm. "Voss, you in position." Logan glanced toward the central data core, a towering construct pulsing with encrypted Dominion communications. "In position," Logan confirmed. "This is our last play," Hale continued. "Take their network offline. No more orders, no more coordination." Logan cracked his knuckles, his hands flew across the interface, bypassing layers of Dominion encryption. The Tarlus had over-engineered their security, believing complexity equated to unbreakability. Logan exploited their arrogance. The entire grid collapsed. In orbit, Exathos' command bridge erupted in red warning lights. The entire war network had gone dark. His remaining ships lost all guidance from the surface, all relays severed. Exathos stood frozen, the realization sinking in. They hadn't just lost control of the battlefield. They had lost the war. Steele's fleet encircled the last of the Dominion's warships, Their engines failing, their shields flickering, Vice Admiral Calder turned to Steele. "They have no escape vectors left. Do we give them terms?" Steele's voice was calm, absolute. "No. Terms are for those who understand consequences. They never expected to answer for their actions. We're about to show them how wrong they were." The final assault order was given. Every remaining Tarlus warship disintegrated into fire and debris. The galactic lesson was learned. No one took from Earth and survived. The sky over Kestris 4 had become a graveyard. The remnants of the Tarlus fleet burned in the upper atmosphere, their ruined husks spiraling downward, leaving long, streaking scars of fire across the colony's skyline. What had once been a calculated invasion force was now nothing but silent wreckage, an empire's hubris shattered in less than a day. Down below, the last Tarlus strongholds were falling. Logan Voss stood at the entrance to what had once been the central command bunker, now a smoldering ruin, bodies of Tarlus officers strewn across the debris-littered corridors. He pressed a boot against the fallen frame of a Dominion enforcer, its lifeless compound eyes reflecting the flickering emergency lights. Doran Hale adjusted his rifle at his side, scanning the surroundings. "They never expected us to come this fast," he muttered. Logan exhaled. That was their mistake. A deep rumbling beneath their feet cut through the stillness, the final Tarlus orbital transport engines firing up, its thrusters kicking up dust and flame as it tried to break free from the surface. The last survivors of the Dominion, the ones who had realized too late that there was no salvation waiting in the void, were trying to flee. Commander Hale's comm earpiece crackled. Admiral Steele's voice came through, calm and unwavering. "Cut them down." Logan glanced toward Hale. No hesitation, no discussion. The sky split apart as Earth's final strike came. A detachment of aerospace gunships broke through the cloud cover, launching coordinated fire at the retreating vessel. The transport's shields flared bright blue before collapsing under the sustained barrage. The engines faltered, sputtering violently, then failed altogether. For a moment the ship hung in the air, crippled, motionless, then it fell. The impact sent a seismic ripple through the valley, a billowing cloud of dirt and fire, swallowing what was left of the Tarlus command. Silence followed. Not the kind born from hesitation, but the kind that marked the definitive end of something. Pollock sailed. "That's the last of them." Logan nodded, wiping the sweat and dust from his brow. "No more slavers, no more colonies lost." Steele's voice returned over the comm, measured yet final. "The Dominion thought they could take what was ours. Let this be a reminder to every power in the galaxy. Humanity does not bargain for what belongs to it." Across the battlefield, Earth's elite forces moved through the aftermath with cold efficiency. Some secured prisoner transport zones, others re-established communications with the colonists, ensuring every survivor was accounted for. From one of the ruined processing centers, a battered Kestris engineer limped toward Logan and Hale, his face streaked with dirt and dried blood. Did we win?" Logan met his gaze, his own exhaustion pressing in like a weight. "They won't be coming back." The man swallowed, then nodded. "Good. The war was over, but its message was only beginning to echo." Inside the command bridge of the Invictus, Steele stood before a massive heads-up display, tracking the long-range transmission relays scattered across Dominion-controlled space. A single transmission was about to be sent, one not encoded in requests, not in negotiations. It would be a statement. Calder approached, reading the draft that had already been prepared. "Sir, if we send this, we're guaranteeing war with any Dominion remnants still out there." Steele's expression didn't shift. "There is no more Dominion." With a single motion, he authorized the broadcast. Across the galaxy, on every Tarlus-controlled world, in every trade network, every political assembly still aligned with their fallen empire, a single message reached them, a recording, taken from the ground. The final moments of Kestris 4's battle, the destruction of the Dominion fleet, the voices of their dying commanders, their desperate last transmissions, pleading for orders that never came. And then, Steele's voice, one sentence: "Take from humanity, and we will erase you." The message rippled outward, reaching not just the Tarlus survivors, but every major power, every fleet, every ruler who had once believed Earth to be just another species, in the cold theater of war. Not anymore. Calder exhaled as the transmission was confirmed. The galaxy's going to remember this day. Steele turned away from the display, his hands behind his back, watching as the last pieces of Dominion wreckage drifted into the planetary rings below. They'd better.